Today we're going to look at the idea of how do we know God exists? Arguments for the existence of God. Now this is a fundamental question because the way you answer this question will determine how you live your life, the choices that you make, how you view right and wrong. So again, I pray this study will be beneficial, that you can glean some things, and we will have a clear understanding that there must be a God that rules the heavens and rules the earth. Now we come to Exodus chapter 5. We want to start here because what we have here is that God is going to instruct, or has instructed, Moses to go back to Egypt to tell Pharaoh to let his people go. And when he does that, this occurs. Look at verse number 1. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, "Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." Look at verse number 2. But Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord. Moreover, I will not let Israel go." Wow. Pharaoh says he's going to refuse to let the children of Israel go because he says he do not know the Lord. He do not know Yahweh. And so what we have here is, we're going to start here because I think it's important that individuals know who the God of the heavens is. And so in this lesson, we will determine that. And I think it will be clear that there must be a ruler, a creator of the heavens and of the earth. So we'll look at three arguments. The three arguments for God's existence. First, we're going to look at the cosmological argument. Secondly, we're going to look at the teleological argument. And thirdly, we're going to look at God's, or the moral argument. So first, let's look at the cosmological argument. Cosmological derives from the Greek word cosmos and refers to everything that exists, the universe and everything in it. Cosmological argument states that for every effect, there must be a cause. If there was a beginning, there must be a beginner. Additionally, the cause must be adequate to cause the effect. For example, a fly cannot knock over an elephant. The cause, again, must be adequate to cause the effect. The cosmological argument can be stated as follows. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Only one of the options below can be correct. The universe is eternal. The universe created itself from nothing. The universe was created by something or someone eternal, not by chance. So notice, who would think, even though people would believe that the universe created itself, or that the universe has always existed and that it will never cease to exist? The only true option here is that the universe was created by something or someone outside of itself, someone that is eternal, and it could not have been created by chance, because again, chance has no creative power in and of itself. In Psalm chapter 19, verse number 1, the text says that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky proclaims his handiwork. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky proclaims his handiwork. In other words, when you look at the creation, the sun, the moon, and the stars, you can't help but know that someone had to have placed that there. Someone greater and outside of that had to have created that. So it says that the heavens declare God's glory, and the sky proclaims his handiwork. Then in Romans chapter 1, verse number 18, in the context of those individuals who have suppressed the existence of God, suppressed the goodness of God, and have gone and served the creature more than the creator. And the text tells us in Romans chapter 1, verse number 20, it says, "For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." He says there's no excuse that individuals would ever think that there isn't a God. You cannot look up into the heavens and see the complexity of the world and think that this and everything in it had to have come into existence by itself. There had to be a cause, and there had to be a cause that was outside of space and time that created it, that was not a part of the creation. The Hebrews chapter 3 and verse number 4. The text tells us that for every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God. Whenever you look at a watch, you realize that there must be a watchmaker. When you look at a house, you realize that there is someone who had to have built that particular house. When you look at a car, you realize that there were people who put their time in to build that car. Whatever you see in the world, you realize that these things did not come into existence by themselves, that someone had to have created them and built them and made them. And so we look at this particular example here where he says that every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. The house owes its existence to a builder. Without the builder, the house would not and could not exist. The house cannot come into existence by itself. Likewise, the builder owes his existence to his parents. So what we have? The house owes his existence to the builder. The builder owes his existence to his parents. Additionally, his parents owe their existence to their parents. Now, this reasoning continues until we get to God, because there has to be a time where that aspect stops with someone who is the first cause, and that first cause is God. And the first person that God created was Adam. So when you start at Adam, you work your way all the way up to the world today, and you will find that at the beginning, the person who created Adam was God. The cause of the universe must be outside and not a part of the universe. In other words, God is not a part of his creation. God is outside of space and time. He's transcendent. He is not a part of in creation. Also, we need to realize that there must be a first cause. And we are arguing now that the first cause is God. God is the one that created everything. He is not inside of creation. He is outside of creation. He's not he does not have no constraints. He's not inside of time. He's not on a time frame. That's why the Bible tells us, when Peter writes, he says 1,000 years is to God as one day, and one day is like 1,000 years. He's outside of time. He's outside of space. And so we need to realize that the universe, the creator of the universe, is outside of space and time, and he's not a part of the universe. Then you have individuals who try to say that there's such thing as a Big Bang theory, where the world began with a Big Bang and an explosion, and the world came to existence over billions of years, and the man has been in the world for millions of years. But again, there had to have been a beginning point. You cannot get molecules and things of that nature. You cannot get those things from nothing. 0 times 0 for 1,000 years is nothing. Time has no creative power, neither does chance have any creative power. You can place, if you take all the lumber in the world and all the nails and everything that you need to build a house, and you lay it there for 1,000 years, for 1,000,000 years, all you will have are the parts to build a house. Unless someone builds the house, that house will not be built. So 0 times 0 for 1,000 years, and for that matter, for 1,000,000 or for 1,000,000,000 years, will always be 0. The point is, you cannot get something from nothing. There had to be someone outside of space and time that created everything that exists. Then we come to the idea of spontaneous generation. It's the hypothetical idea that living organisms develop from non-living matter. However, we realize, or should realize, that life does not spontaneously spring forth from non-life. Although some individuals, as we'll look at, believe that. But life only comes from life. That's biogenesis. In Genesis chapter 1, when God created animals, and he created the giraffes, and he created the dinosaurs. All these things that he created, they created or reproduced after their kind. A tiger produced after a tiger. A tiger and a giraffe cannot get together. They're not of the same kind. Now, you can get a tiger and a lion, you'll have a liger, but you cannot have a tiger and an elephant. They're not of the same kind. Life produce life, and they produce after their own kind. Furthermore, you cannot get non-living, something that is non-living, to produce something that is living. It has to be something that is living, that already has life in it, in order for there to be life to continue. Again, some people used to believe that small animals came into existence by themselves. For example, they believed that maggots just appeared out of nowhere. But we have an experiment, perhaps you learned in school, by a man by the name of Francesco Redi. He did a test. And in this test, he had 3 jars. One jar he covered with paper. One jar he left open. And one jar he put gauze on it. And what you have there is you had meat in each one of these jars. And you notice that the flies could not get to the one, obviously, that was covered with the complete paper. The flies did get to the meat that was open. And what happened? You had maggots on the meat. But what was interesting is the jar that had the gauze on it. The flies landed on it, but the maggots were on top of the gauze, indicating to them that maggots come from flies. They did not just spontaneously come from the meat. And so it's interesting that individuals must understand that spontaneous generation is not real. Life does not just spring out of nowhere. Life begets life. Life comes from life. So again, we mentioned Genesis chapter 1, verse 21. The text says, God created the great sea creatures and living creatures that moves, with which the waters swarm. He says, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And so what we have here is God creates everything after their kind, after their likeness. So you can have 2 animals of the same kind coming together. You can't have 2 animals of different kinds. You can't have a whale and a bird come together and create anything. So they have to be after their kind, and they have to be living. Only something that is living has the ability to create, and they have to be of the same kind. So we need to realize, as I stated before, time cannot create anything. And you know, a lot of times scientists, those individuals who think that science is the answer for everything, they think that, again, time, if we only have enough time, we can get the world in the state that it is in today. All we need is time. But time has no creative power. Again, 0 times 0 for 1 billion years will always be 0. It can be nothing but 0. So what am I saying? I'm indicating that the world had to have had a cause, something outside of space and time. And because of this, what do we have? We have that God created the world, and he is the only thing that is adequate, only person that is adequate enough to create the world as we see it today. We'll continue. Now we'll come to the teleological argument. If there is order or design, there must be a designer. There is order and complexity in, number 1, the design of the universe. Number 2, the design of a human body. We have information in the DNA. We have mind origination. All of these things cry out for there being a designer. In other words, our bodies are too complex. The universe is too complex for it to have originated from nothing. There had to be a designer. And you have to ask yourself this question: which came first, a baby or a human woman? Which came first? And even when you think about this, is it even reasonable to assume, even logical to think that with the complexity of the human body, that a baby came before a human body, a human woman? Is that even, are we even able to wrap our mind around that particular idea? That could even be a consideration. The complexity of the universe and the human body cries out for design. The complexity of the respiratory system, the nervous system, the circulatory system, the digestive system, the skeletal system, the reproductive system, they all cry out for purpose and design. It is not reasonable to conclude that all these systems that are in our bodies that work perfectly within our body all evolved over time and by chance. That cannot be. Is it even reasonable to conclude that over time and by chance that a male species and a female species with the right reproductive organs were developed and made over time and developed over time, and just so happened that they were just the right way to and the right design to be able to come together and to create human life? Again, that's not even reasonable. That's not logical to reason that that can be the case. The Proverbs writer says in chapter 20 and verse number 12, Proverbs 20 and 12 says that the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made even both of them. Notice what it says. God made the ear to hear, and he made the eye to see. It cries out for design, and God is the designer. Again, in Psalms 139, verse number 14, the text says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. He says, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. The body is so complex. It has to have had someone outside of it and greater than it, an intelligent being, to have created the complexity that the human body has. And we are arguing now that that creator, that designer, has to be God. Again, the world shows intelligent design. It does. All around you, you see design. Whenever you look at anything in the world, you realize and know that someone made it. Your phone, your computer, whatever it is, your television, someone made it. It did not make itself. So are we to conclude that the complexity of the human body, that the complexity of the universe, all these things are by chance? The world shows intelligent design. There must be an intelligent designer. Therefore, God exists and is that intelligent designer. We looked at the human body. Let's again think about the universe. There are billions of galaxies in the universe. We live in only one. There are billions and billions of stars in the universe. But yet and still in Psalm 147 verse number 4, the text says, he determines the numbers of the stars. Why? Because he's the one that created it. He created every single one of them. And the text says he gives to all of them their names. Even with all the billions and billions and billions of stars in the world, God knows every single one. Not only does he know every single star, he knows every single person. Because he's outside of space. He's outside of time. He's the one that has created all these things for his glory. When you think about the sun and the earth is exactly the correct distance from the sun so that life can be sustained on the earth. If it was a little bit closer, what do you think would happen? We will all be consumed by the sun. If we're a little farther away, we will all freeze. If the earth were a little bit closer, again, life could not be sustained. If life was a little bit farther away, life could not be sustained on the earth. It is the right distance from the sun so that life can be maintained and sustained. That cries out for design and cries out for a designer. The moon's distance from the earth supports ocean life. The moon's tides are needed to sustain life in the oceans, and these tides are based on the moon's distance from the earth. The moon is the right distance from the earth. And what do we have? Again, this cries out for a designer, and that designer is God. Lastly, let's look at the moral argument. The objective right and wrong exists. Objective right and wrong exists. When we talk about objective right and wrong, we're talking about laws and things that are right and wrong for everyone. Not subjective, not based off of how I feel, but there are certain things that are right and wrong for everyone. And so if there's objective right and wrong, if they exist, there must be a lawgiver. And we're going to argue that these sense of right and wrong, the rightness of these things that we must do, stem from the very character and very nature of God. There are things that are always wrong, and there are things which are always right for everyone in every location. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It doesn't matter what continent you're on. It doesn't matter what country you're in, what city you're in. There are certain things that are right for everyone, and it doesn't matter where you are or who you are. Secondly, man has a conscience. Scientists and theories cannot answer the question, where does man's conscience come from? Because not only is man physical, he's also spiritual. And so we also have mind. You can't place mind in a test tube. There is a sense of oughtness that we all have. There are things which we ought to do, and there are things which we ought not to do. Everyone has that sense of oughtness until they suppress it, until they sear their conscience and violate their conscience so much that nothing bothers them. It's only when they violate their conscience and their conscience has been nullified that they feel that anything goes and there is no objective right and wrong. So we ask the questions: is right and wrong objective or subjective? Do they apply to all people and at all times? Or is right or wrong a matter of opinion? And you live in a society now where individuals think that right and wrong, what's right for you is right for you, and what's wrong for me is wrong for me, and so forth. But I ask you this question: was Adolf Hitler wrong by killing millions and millions and millions of Jewish individuals? Or was his view just different from everyone else's? Again, we argue that there are things that are right for everyone and there are things that are wrong for everyone. And unless your conscience has been seared, unless your conscience has been suppressed, then the answer for these questions would inevitably be that there are certain things that are right and there are certain things that are wrong for all people. We live in a society where everything is relative. Relativism believes that societies or individuals can decide what is right and what is wrong. These ideas, they argue, vary from culture to culture, to person to person. And so you ask yourself, is lying wrong? Is stealing wrong? Is killing wrong? And they will argue that these things are wrong in as much as they bother someone else. You determine if lying is wrong. You determine if stealing is wrong. You determine if killing is wrong. But as we will look, these things are only wrong. They're only okay. They're only a matter of opinion. Only time that happens is when it's not the person that is being wrong. Morals do not just describe how things are. Morals tell us how things ought to be. They tell us how things ought to be. Just because things are a certain way does not mean that they should be that way. So when individuals argue that, okay, that happens over here in society, that happens over there in society, what people are doing, just because people are doing something doesn't mean that it is right. Someone taking someone's life over here does not say, okay, it's okay because they are doing it. No, it is wrong for individuals to take someone's life. It is wrong for someone to lie to someone. It is wrong for someone to take something that belongs to someone else. All these things are objectively wrong. So just because two people give different answers to the same question does not mean that there is no right answer. Just because you ask two people and one person says, you know what, it doesn't matter if you kill someone, it doesn't matter if you rape someone, it doesn't matter if you do these things. Just because someone gives an opposite answer from someone else does not mean that there is no correct answer. Truth is absolute. There is absolute truth. Just because two countries disagree on abortion or homosexuality or whatever the case may be does not mean that there is no right or wrong answer. It just means that you have individuals in a society that have legalized sin. And there is a right way and there is a wrong way. And we are arguing now that the right thing to do, morality, stems from the very nature of God. Some people believe that right and wrong exists, but society makes the decision on what is right and wrong. Again, some believe that what is true for you is true for you, and what is true for me is true for me. In other words, you have your truth and I have my truth. And you have to ask them, well, is that truth? Because truth is objective. There is an objective standard by which men and women must follow. Where does morality come from? Morality consists of commands and not suggestions. Stealing is wrong. Committing adultery is wrong. Lying is wrong. Murdering is wrong. There is and are moral standards that are universal, that applies to everyone in every place. And morality stems from the very nature of God. Morality applies to all people in all places at all times. Morality is objective. Right and wrong exists outside and regardless of one's belief. It doesn't matter what you believe about something. Something is still right. Just because you say, okay, 1 + 1 is 3, doesn't make it so. There is an objective standard that 1 + 1 = 2. Everyone, again, believes in an objective standard of right and wrong when they are the one that is wrong. When you are the one that has had property taken from, when you've had someone in your family who has been killed senselessly, murdered senselessly, you realize then that there is an objective standard and you want justice. Everyone, again, has an objective standard of right and wrong when the wrong has been done to them. The three arguments for God's existence that we have argued here. Number one, the cosmological argument has the idea that for every effect, there must be an adequate cause. And we have argued that the only adequate cause for the complexity of the universe, for the universe to exist and for humankind to exist, it must be God. And then we looked at the teleological argument, the idea that where there is design, there must be a designer. And we look at the idea of morality. When you think about morality and morals stem from the very nature and character of God. There's an objective standard by which all men and women must abide by. So again, the cosmological argument. We argued again, what begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Now we don't say, okay, what caused God? Because the argument here is what begins to exist. God did not begin to exist. God has always existed. That which is eternal has no existence. So we got to argue and realize that, okay, number one, the universe is eternal, which we know that can't be true. The universe created itself from nothing. Again, that can't be true. So the only viable option, the only logical option is the universe was created by someone that is eternal and not by chance. And that someone was God and is God. Again, a teleological argument. If there is order and design, there must be a designer. And we have established that there is order and complexity, number one, in the universe. In this way, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the entire universe works together. We've established that there is design in the human body, the complexity of the human body. We have established that there must be a designer. And lastly, the moral argument. Objective right and wrong exists. There must be a lawgiver. There are things that are always wrong, and there are things that are always right for everyone in every location. Man has a conscience, a sense of oughtness. There are things which we ought to do, and there are things which we ought not to do. And it doesn't matter where you live, what continent you're on, what country you're in. There are things that are always wrong. There are things that are always right. So in conclusion, we've established that there is a God who stands outside of space and time, and he is the creator of the entire universe.